You joined me today for an early morning start at Singapore Changi Airport. So early, in fact, that the dual fountain wasn't even running. My trip today is the short but highly competitive route from Singapore over to Kuala Lumpur. There are quite a few airlines that you can take to do this trip, but I decided to go with the most premium of them all, on Singapore Airlines with an A350. That being said, I was departing from the lesser T2 terminal, which serves more of the secondary flights rather than the flagship Singapore Airlines routes. The economy check-in was busy-ish, but nothing terrible, and there were enough self-serve kiosks and bag drop to service the crowd. With Star Alliance Gold status, I was able to use the empty premium economy check-in area. However, it was still a DIY bag tag and drop-off affair, same as economy. A manned check-in desk was offered as the business class line, but technically Gold status, even with KrisFly, doesn't allow you to use the business lines. Passing through immigration only took a few seconds, and because Changi does security screening at the gate, I was airside in no time. Terminal 2 might not be as flashy as T3, but it still has plenty to offer for passengers flying through Changi. Lounge access was included as part of my status, but Singapore Airlines offers separate lounges for business class versus status passengers in economy or premium economy. It can be slightly confusing as the business class lounge is called Silver Kris and the pleb lounge is KrisFly Gold, so it seems silver outranks gold in this instance. Honestly, I wouldn't bother spending too much time here. The seating was standard and not particularly private or anything, and there were no views to admire either. However, there was a good breakfast offering, so I had a snack before heading out to my gate, catching a glimpse of my plane along the way. Like I said before, the security screening is done at the gates in Singapore, so be sure to account for that time-wise when going to your gate. There's no priority queue, so even if you're flying in business or first, you need to line up all the same. Unfortunately, there was moisture on the windows, but here you can see my plane for today's flight. An Airbus A350 in a 3-class configuration with business, premium economy and economy. Premium economy isn't actually sold on this flight, but you can pay extra to select these seats as part of an economy ticket. Personally, I think it's pretty cool to have such a big jet on this short flight. Boarding started without any fuss or fanfare and I made my way down the bridge. Scoot, Malaysian and AirAsia use narrow bodies, so a long-haul capable wide-body is a real treat for economy passengers. Do note that Singapore Airlines also uses their 737s for this route, so be sure to check your aircraft before booking. I love these wide business class seats. People seem to have mixed opinions about them, but personally I'm a fan. Then we pass through a small premium economy cabin, of which I'm actually not a fan on the A350. There are some subtle differences between the premium economy seats on the A350 compared to the 777 or A380, and that version is slightly better in my opinion. And finally, we reach the economy section, with 187 seats in a 333 layout. I was lucky enough to snag a seat in the smaller forward cabin, but I think Singapore Airlines might normally charge for this section. Initial impressions were good. The seats looked comfortable and didn't appear to be absolutely squished together. As usual, I chose my preferred seat in the last row of the cabin and shuffled into my seat, 46A. I'm not a tall person, so sitting back in the seat I had plenty of knee room. The seatback pocket had quite a few storage pockets which I liked. It means you won't lose your phone in the usual one giant pocket that these seats normally have. The tray table folds out and has a mirror as well, but it seems my table had seen better days, with a little patchwork repair job. To the right of the screen is another cup holder, and in the middle is where I would expect to see an IFE remote, except there isn't one. Instead, there's the overhead light and crew call buttons. On the left are various sockets and the headphone jack. The armrests are narrow, but at least the central ones do go up in case you score some extra room with a free neighbouring seat or two. Underneath the seats were individual power outlets, and I was impressed that there was one for each passenger. Usually, there would also be a pillow and a blanket at each seat if this A350 was operating a proper long-haul sector, but on today's short flight, no such amenities were offered. This last row also had some added privacy thanks to the blocked out middle section, but it is a toilet block, so don't expect that privacy to last if people start hanging around the area. The seat recline is a combination of the base sliding forward as well as the backrest tilting. It was okay for this short flight, but I have a feeling that the recline in my seat was a tiny bit less than the others. I tried to capture another seat, but I don't know if it's just me, but it looked like that seat had a little bit more recline on the backrest. Of course, I have no actual data to back up this claim, so take it with a grain of salt. The headrest had adjustable wings, which I love. I don't think people realise just how much this helps you keep your head in place if you really squeeze the sides close together. With my hand luggage out of the way, there was okay foot space, but it is interrupted by the seat frame. As far as I could tell, there wasn't a footrest, which seems like an obvious omission. Singapore's KrisWorld IFE system is excellent. There's a huge range of movies, TVs, games, and even live TV. The screen is a good size and the touch response was excellent. In fact, I found it much easier to use as a touchscreen compared to using a remote. On such a short flight, who needs eye-fee anyway, just look out the window and enjoy. Parked next to us was a special livery Air India Dreamliner, an airline I'd be flying soon, with a trip report coming whenever I can get around to it. Now, for that standard practice of pushing back and watching the safety video.
If you're not using your device, it must be held in your hand.
The taxi to the runway was insanely long, and honestly it felt like we were going to drive to KL. I've checked the timestamps on my clips, and it took 25 minutes from pushback to runway. At least we passed some interesting planes along the way. Eventually, we did make it to the runway and finally took off, bound for Malaysia. I had some great views from my seat, and the crew started with the meal service as we levelled out. Surprisingly, there was no food on offer at all, not even a biscuit or anything small. Instead, we were offered a cup of juice and tea or coffee. In case the in-flight map or Cruiseworld system isn't enough entertainment, Singapore Airlines offers Wi-Fi on board as well. There are several ways to get this for free, but I didn't qualify for any of them, so I would have had to purchase a plan. I don't really care for in-flight Wi-Fi anyway, so I took the rest of the flight to recline and relax until we started our approach into KL and had to get ready to land. Obviously, this 1 hour flight is never going to be a true representation of the long-haul experience on a Singapore Airlines A350, but hopefully it gives some insight into what to expect on board in terms of the hard product as well as the airport experience at Changi. There's no denying it's cool to fly on a widebody for such a short flight, but Singapore to KL is such a competitive route, there are many cheaper ways to fly between the two cities. I was tossing up whether to fly on Scoot or AirAsia, but once I added in some extras, the price difference to Singapore Airlines was negligible. However, if you don't need a bag and you're not concerned about where you sit, I'd save the cash and go for one of the cheaper flights instead.